Hello, everybody. We'll be starting in a few moments. Had a little bit of problem with Zoom and our window capture. So we are. As soon as Chapman appears, and there he is, we'll start the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome
Oh,
to
there we go.
another Lessons Learned podcast. Hopefully, this time around, we'll keep our power on. And I don't want to jinx it, but that's just the way it happens. And we'll be able to have a full program. Like we were trying to do yesterday, we'll be discussing the value of having remakes and remixes, and reinventing, and all that in video games. So hopefully that will be an intriguing and interesting conversation. But first, of course, the news. And we started with Nintendo. Nintendo, of course, as most people know, is expanding quite aggressively into the mobile market. Mario Kart Tour, which is the game they're now pushing, is going to be free, sort of, on on mobile, except for the part that if you want the complete game, you're gonna have to pay a $4.99 monthly subscription fee, according to Polygon. Also has microtransactions as well, including loot boxes. But Mario Kart also offers, this is quoting the article in Polygon, so offers a subscription service called Gold Pass. Subscription gives players gold gifts, which are exclusive bonuses for compelling in-game tours. Gold challenges, which are challenges that will allow players to display exclusive badges, and 200cc mode, the fastest racing setting in Mario Kart Tour. That's right, there's an entire game mode hidden behind a subscription fee. The only thing I gotta say, you guys know how I feel about microtransactions, is WTF, Nintendo. So I mean, you know, I was saying this before the channel. I'm describing Nintendo as taking one confident path, step forward, and then taking a backflip, giant backflip into the void next time. It's like, hey, you're like one step forward and whee. I'm like, feels like that thing that they're doing, because of course they're gonna be doing. However, in other news, this is from Polygon again on PlayStation. The Last of Us Part 2 has no multiplayer. This is just going to be a solo journey, according to the news. Contrary to early statements, Naughty Dog has confirmed The Last of Us Part 2 will not have any multiplayer components. One of its developers confirmed the lack of multiplayer to Polygon as a press event in Los Angeles this week, reversing early statements and indicating the game will not be strictly single-player experience. Multiplayer will not be included in the Last Part of Us. The Anthony Newman, the game's co-director, I know we had kind of announced that, kind of, as in we did, but things changed because, reasons. He would have multiplayer, but as the game has developed, it became so ambitious, so grand in scope, and so into getting this complexity that it really required a full focus to deliver a single player experience. Translation: money. It cost too much money to develop. Sony was only going to give us X amount of dollars, or yen, or whatever. We decided to cut out the multiplayer. And you know what? That's fine.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good. That's surprising, because I mean, and in a lot of, I think, studios, they probably would have been like, well, multiplayer sells better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, I don't quite understand, especially with Naughty Dog. I wonder if this is like a mandate from Sony that, or at least maybe it's not so much a mandate, but it's like, well, maybe Sony gives us more money if we shoehorn in like a multiplayer aspect to our games.
I feel it's the opposite. I feel actually that Sony, because this is an exclusive, and they're not really, I mean, they do have a lot of multiplayer titles, of course, but they're third party. They don't feel the need to have a multiplayer because since it's an exclusive, they're going to be playing it on the PlayStation, right? The kind of multiplayer thing is to sort of, everybody wants to play in the same platform. Although now cross-platform play is becoming increasingly thing, even on PlayStation. But it's like, we already have you there, right? So we don't have to worry about it. And it's all about adding to the catalog.
Well, yeah, which is because I believe So Naughty Dog's the ones that made the Uncharted series. I
Hmm.
believe Uncharted 3 is the one that had the multiplayer thing.
Yeah.
I actually have I have The Last of Us. I started playing and then I just really kind of stopped because I really didn't get into it all that much. But like I can't see myself like, oh, I enjoy this game and stealthing around and trying to escort this little girl somewhere, and it's like I can't imagine trying to play a multiplayer version of this. I'm not sure what screams multiplayer.
Zombie multiplayer mode. That basically would be it. Horde mode, that sort of thing, which is pretty tired.
Yeah, but
And also I think it's if Sony, this is let's think. We're now in September, going to October 2019. We were talking about this yesterday before the power went out, and I keep saying that I'm jinxing myself here. Uh, uh, but they're moving to 2020, which is going to be the release of the new console. The Last of Us, when it first came out, now as a remaster, is also coming out. It came out, I think, this month. Last of Us was one of the last titles that was Sony exclusive of the PlayStation 4, and it sort of marked the high point of the PlayStation 4. Look what we can do. This is our height, and this game is going to mark the high point of, this generation, right? And they want to end up on a positive note. If it has anything that could mar it, something as a shooting multiplayer people don't play, and it just costs more to develop anyway, they're gonna toss it. Doesn't make sense for them to support it, right? It's all about exclusives. It's all about saying we have the best games, period, right? Particularly how was it the werewolf vampire game thing where you're in you're supposed to be the Knights of the Round Table thing that was in Sony
oh,
exclusive.
the I think you're thinking of The Order.
The Order was that was a Sony
1886.
Exclusive.
Yeah, actually, with that one, I'm kind of surprised. You would think that it would have like some shoehorn in multiplayer aspect to it.
Yeah, but I think the learn from that is like it's better just to have a good solid game than just have any game. Although some stinkers have gotten into Sony's library as well.
Well, I wouldn't call The Order 1886 a solid game, but it's
no,
passable.
I was saying that there wasn't. So it's like you need to take out the multiplayer. You go ahead and take out the multiplayer. We don't care. Sure, go ahead, no problem.
I mean, it's okay. It's more of a tech demo game, but yeah, I wouldn't call it. I don't think it was as awesome as extraordinary as people were expecting it from the trailers.
Mm-hmm. Another news, an old game that has now become a new game on the PS4. Finally, Jedi Outcast on PS4 doesn't invert Y-axis. Fans revolt. Aspia promises a fix. For people who don't know, Jedi Outcast started as a first-person Star Wars first-person shooter of the Jedi Knight series that started in PC with FMBs and then went full on, same graphics. So the graphics are old, and I played Jedi Outcast. I still have a copy of it for my PC. I probably could load it up. It's an okay game. It's a fun game. But the fact that it doesn't have the reason why I said you can't invert y-axis is that I always play with inverted y-axis. Because when I started playing, I played with simulators, flight sims, and of course, in flight sims, when you pull back on the stick, you go up, and you push forward, you go down. So I got used to that. I was like, some people are like, "Oh, I just push forward." Yeah, but push forward doesn't feel like this. When I push back like this. So I'm just used to it. So I couldn't play this if it didn't have invert y-axis. It would just throw me off. It seems like to some people it seems like it doesn't matter, but I think to a lot of people, including myself, it would be a big deal, especially in a shooter where you have to keep eyes on target, right? It's like you keep pushing. It's like you're going. It's like okay, yeah. And so that I don't know why they skip on that.
You would think it'd be something really easy to patch in, though.
It's something that is always should be there.
Yeah. Oh, I kind of like looking at it. I've never heard of it. Star Wars Jedi Knights 2, Jedi Outcast.
Yeah. I played Jedi Outcast and Outcast 2 and Jedi Academy. They were, pretty cool games. So there's that. Bandai Namco sued Throwback Console Maker over Mrs. Pac-Man mini cabinet. The company alleges that AtGames was misrepresenting rights to Namco licenses. Bandai Namco sued AtGames, the makers of plug-and-play retro game consoles, alleging AtGames' productions of an authorized Miss Pac-Man mini cabinet ruined negotiations with the game's original developers, and what has resolved ownership issues going back to 1983. Now, while this is very interesting, because Mrs. Pac-Man originally was not made by Bandai Namco. It was made by an American company. I forgot to even mention who actually made it. I don't think they're because yeah. Then the owners right Miss Pac-Man product. They don't. Yeah, they don't mention who. Yeah, they don't mention who was the original. I mean, Pineapple Namco.
General Computer Corporation.
Yeah, owned originally the Pac-Man IP and still does. But Miss Pac-Man was. Let me see who actually created Miss Pac-Man. Because Miss Pac-Man was Midway Games. Yeah, Midway Games was the one that Atari, Midway Games, General Computer Corporation. Midway was Midway Games. They developed it as a solo color swapped and slightly improved game without the license. So that's when they're referring we going back to 1983 because it came out. It made a lot of money for everybody concerned, except for Bandai Namco. And they've been probably litigating that aspect of that since 1983, 83, 93, 2003, to 2013. Wow, over 40 years. Okay, so there's that. So that's an interesting take on things. And in other news, again for Polygon, Xbox One game streaming service project xCloud goes public in October. A public preview of Microsoft Cloud Gaming will be available in the US, UK, and Korea. So I guess Microsoft is going full ahead with their cloud service. I guess they're committed to that. Whether or not it will be a direct competition to Stadia or whatever else comes out, who knows? But it's been tried before. It has some games including Halo 5 Guardians, Gears 5, Killer Instinct, and Sea of Thieves. Part of the preview. It'll be a closed beta. So for those who have Xbox, or if there will be, I think it's just for Xbox One, right? It won't be for PC just yet. Not that open yet, but we'll see. We'll see. Medieval remake demo comes to PS4. It'll only be available until October 6th. It's a remake. Interesting. Considering today's topic of the 1998 PlayStation cult classic Hack and Slash. It will be released at the end of October, but players who can wait that long will be a chance to demo the game a little sooner. So if you're a fan of Medieval or you never played Medieval, and of course you own a PlayStation 4, 5. We in the 5? No, we're still 4. Yeah, you can try it out. Looks like they just spruce up the graphics at least, so there's that. Nothing else. You get to play.
I thought it was supposed to be like a complete remake. I don't think it's like an HD update. I think it's an entire, like, it's been remade from the ground up.
It says game has new combat, which include everything from bows and arrows to swords and axes. But it couldn't be Medieval without Slapstick Tumor, so Skeleton protagonist Sir Daniel pulling his own arm up and using it as a weapon to be an option in demo as well. I guess they actually did spring a couple of changes. In other news, Bethesda cannot catch a break, even though it's not strictly their fault. Fallout 76 wearable helmet recalled because of dangerous mold. This is the Nuka-Cola themed helmet. Sold at GameStop, and I guess GameStop can also not catch a break, but not the one including the collector's edition. Essentially, it's painted in red, yellow, as opposed to gray and blue. A collectible helmet produced with the celebrated launch of Fallout 76 is being recalled because it contains dangerous levels of mold. While no incidents of injuries have been reported at the time, consumers are urged to contact the retailer and return the product for a full refund. It retailed at $149.99 US.
That's the thing. It says for high levels of mold, it doesn't clarify whether if the lining develops mold really easily or does it already come with mold. It's like, and if it does, how did that happen?
Also, the sale figures have also added to the article here on Polygon. Out of the 20,000 Nuka Call theme helmets that were manufactured, only 32 were sold. Yikes. I mean,
wait,
sure.
Only 32 total?
Only 32 were sold. It says all those companies were directly notified about the recall, or 20,000 units have been recalled. So not only did they only sell 32 out of 20,000, not even 1%.
Wow.
Will be about 2,200 will be 1%. Yeah.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear about that.
Yeah.
That's wow.
Yeah.
Well, and that makes sense because if you've ever shopped at a GameStop, they seem to really keep track of their inventory. If you ever gone shopping online too, and you're looking for used game, they can tell you which of their stores has a used copy of whatever game you're looking for. So it shouldn't be no surprise that they have that accurate data, but it's like, wow. And honestly, if you've ever been to a GameStop in recent years, it's mostly full of tat like that.
Yeah, they've been changing their business model to sell everything but games because they don't sell a lot of games anymore unless they're used games or something like that. So there's that. Yikes. Now PC Gamer giving a piece of news here. Australian police investigating CSGO and Overwatch teams over corruption complaints. 6 CSGO players were arrested last month and more may be coming. Okay, so why don't we talk about corruption here? Okay. The players allegedly made a deal to throw matches and then place bets on those matches themselves. An Australian Broadcasting Corporation report says the police have also received reports about corruption involving pro Overwatch teams. Money. When you have money to throw, you get money to spend and money to cheat as well.
They were throwing games. Wow.
Well, welcome to sports. I mean,
it's going to be interesting when we see this reach, some high-end esports scene where like, oh no, somebody threw the game so they could win a bunch of money and stuff because there was a bet or something.
I mean, we're talking about a lot of money to be made, that's for sure. So, yeah. Oops.
Maybe. Oh, damn! No, I better not say it because I'm going to give the gaming industry ideas. Like, don't put.
No. Yeah. Talk about ideas, bad ones at least. Infinity Ward says that Modern Warfare PS4 exclusive survival mode is just a sliver of spec subs. You're like, huh? Why is that important? Because it is a PS4 exclusive survival mode up until October 1st, 2020. So this game is coming out on October the 1st, 2019. And it's going to be an exclusive for an entire year to PlayStation for until 2020, until I guess, PlayStation 5 is about to come out. So we don't care to have it anymore.
And of course, Call of Duty is only a yearly thing. It's not like they support every copy equally.
That's true. And this is what Taylor Kurosaki, very interesting name, narrative director Taylor Kurosaki said, the decision is above our pay grade. The question here is, who made that decision, right? And why? Did Sony pay extra to Activision in some way to encourage them to have this game, have this exclusivity, so they can have this sort of transfer over effect. It was like, hey, you played for a year. This exclusive, the best version of the game was and is the one on PlayStation 4. The PlayStation 5 is going to come out with a new Call of Duty, of course, probably. You want to keep playing on that? Well, play on the PlayStation 5. But it makes Activision look the fool again, because it's like, dude, why? You shouldn't. Especially after they promised that they would release all missions and more will be released simultaneously across all platforms. So I guess a broken promise from Activision.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I think Activision and Sony might have like this kind of hush hush deal, because this isn't the first time we've seen something like this. This was actually pretty prevalent in Destiny, the first Destiny, with I believe there was a couple of things content wise that were just exclusive to just to the PlayStation version. And eventually I think it did get released for the other for platform. PC and for the other platforms, but I think that was like towards the end of like the regular Destiny's life cycle, even though I believe Destiny 1 still has a pretty active community. And of course like there was that one time where I woke up one morning and it's like Destiny 2 demo was pushed on my console. I'm like, like what? When did that happen?
Yeah. Talking about broken promises and our own whipping boy, BioWare. BioWare is ditching Anthem's original post-launch content plans to focus on core issues. Again, not the first time they do it. Following much delayed release of Anthem Cataclysm update last month, BioWare says that it will be ditching its original announced post-launch content plans. Will now be delivering seasonal updates in place of its planned regular acts in order to focus on core issues. And by core issues, they mean making the game actually work. Still, I mean, this so reads like the BioWare Swan song. You know, I'm just waiting for that video from a friend of the channel that says the death of the studio, death of BioWare.
Or death of Anthem.
The death of Anthem. It's gonna happen. Nerdslayer is probably already working on it. Hello, Nerdslayer, by the way.
Death of a game Anthem.
Death of a game waiting Anthem, for that. Death of a company. Death of BioWare. It's gonna happen. I mean, I feel that even if Dragon Age whatever, how many colons I put in, is great, you can only roll the die so many times and come up like a saving throw like a 16 or better or something like that, just to keep yourself afloat. Especially when you're working for EA. Like, EA is gonna go like, you know what, this is not worth it.
I think in order to appease their overlords and the community, BioWare would have to make Dragon Age 4 would have to be a pretty good game. I mean, it doesn't have to be the super best. Like, if everyone was pleased with Inquisition, I don't think that was that great at the game, actually. It was pretty good. It was okay, but not fantastic.
Just a moment.
Ooh. Anyways, I think that BioWare is gonna afterwards. It's gonna have to be a really strong Mass Effect game, and it has to be super good. Whether it goes with Andromeda's timeline or a prequel, I have no idea. Otherwise, I really don't think that BioWare is gonna be able to No Man's Sky this game at all. That's kind of sad too, because No Man's Sky it's going to be a term now. No Man's Sky this game. Oh, kind of bodes pretty bad. Anyways, I was just talking to the ether of essentially. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry. Just
okay.
See if I was on camera.
Yeah, so Dragon Age 4 is going to have to be pretty good. And then I think the follow-up game has to be some sort of Mass Effect game that has to be really good.
Hmm.
and just to win back the fans and BioWare. But again, we all know that this isn't gonna be the same BioWare as previous games, and I don't really think that BioWare has it in them to No Man's Sky
Yeah.
Anthem.
I don't think so. I mean, and also it's a lot of people who have been the core company. They have left, um, and we all know about the Bioware magic and stuff like that. And we haven't seen any real signs of that changing. And the more pressure that the company's under, the more likely they're going to do these things, right? Rush things, try to get things out because we have to, because you know. And I think it doesn't bode well for them.
I So if I'm gonna predict what's gonna happen slowly to BioWare, they're not gonna get shut down completely. I think we're gonna eventually see, maybe in a couple of months, maybe in a year or 2, but
Hmm.
I honestly think we're gonna see, BioWare Austin get shut down, and not really shut down, maybe just that staff absorbed elsewhere and stuff.
Or renamed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't
Which,
think.
well, if that would have happened, remember BioWare also is basically running Star Wars: The Old Republic.
Mhm.
So by doing that, essentially, the Electronic Arts is saying the one thing that I think is actually keeping BioWare as an entity going is the fact that Electronic Arts wants to keep the Star Wars franchise because it makes a lot of money for them, and they should pay probably a lot of money to get the franchise. And that means that if they're either giving up on the MMO or transferring, essentially rebranding the companies that's running it, they're basically cutting their ties, and I think that would accelerate the demise of Bioware because essentially saying, okay, if you don't have this, which is profitable or needed for us, what do you got? Anthem? Eh.
Is that
Mass
is
Effect? Eh. Other games? Eh.
that Shadow Realms game that they
Yeah.
were?
Yeah. So it's gonna go like, well, you got nothing for us, so bye bye Bioware. We got your IP. Thank you very much. Have a good night, and off they
Yeah.
go.
Is the that is Star Wars MMO still going strong? Is there still players in that?
Yeah, they're still going. I wouldn't know they're going strong, but they're still going. So that's it. Yeah. We were talking about this off camera, but before the show started, so we continue with the story. I think it'll be the last one for the day. Frogware says publisher Focus Home is wrongfully delisting games. Frogware is a sort of mid-tier not publisher. That's Focus Home. But Frogware makes games like The Sinking City and Sherlock Holmes and similar games.
Although actually Focus Home Entertainment didn't actually publish Sinking City. That was actually completely different. They have a
Okay.
different publisher.
Okay.
Call it Cthulhu.
Oh, roughly, yeah. And according to them, the games that are affected are Sherlock Holmes: Crimes and Punishment, Testament of Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper, and Mac Runner: Dark Pulse. So that could expand to as more contracts expire. Essentially, the licensing agreement to publish the games with Focus Home Interactive has ended, and supposedly this bizarre policy now they just put in effect, which was not part of the original contract, by the way, goes something like this. According to the official statement sent to us last week, Focus has put in place a policy according to which they will not transfer any title, the content ID or title ID belonging to any developer which has removed all their games from the Focus catalog. In other words, if you take away your games because the contract is over, which is what you know that's what's going to happen, we're gonna punish you by not giving you back the thing that belongs to you.
Yeah.
I mean, the legality of that is, I'm thinking, non-existent. And I think Focus Home is betting that Focus Home Interactive is betting that Frogwares doesn't have the money to sue them, you know, and survive as a studio. But that is not good, my friend, especially for a so-called mid-tier AA developed publisher, right?
Yeah.
Who's not supposed to act like the big boys. But again, we talked about this before, and it seems that the rot is deep into the video game market and companies, and affects both independent studios all the way to the AAA. So it seems another example of, not only shafting the consumer, if people wanted to buy these games or wanted to be supported by these games, because these are online games, and if there's any patches or fixes, well, you can't access the game because they're delisted. You're stuck. So they're not getting any more support. So again, just like we talk about Anthem, the patching culture in a way strikes again.
Yeah, it's also kind of a hit to like game preservation.
Mm-hmm. I mean, talk about game preservation, the fact that we were already talking about a lawsuit about Miss Pac-Man dating over 40 years, 1983, or the problems with the license. Imagine something today which is all digital and nobody has the masters. There's no, where just a mess, just a mess.
Yeah,
And
I like physical media, even though that sort of has its issues nowadays too.
mm-hmm, yeah. So that's about for the news, and now we're gonna go talking about all games. So we're gonna talk about the value of remasters. The reason why I think we're talking about this is, of course, most of us probably have seen the very gorgeous screens of Final Fantasy VII, and other games that are coming out. Medieval is getting remastered, etc. That seems to be a part of the industry now. And the question is, do they inherently have any value? Because I've been thinking about, for example, and this comes from H. Warmer Guy's video on movies and director's cut. And one of the points that he raises is that whether or not the director's cut, which in a way is a remaster, film format, is better than the original, or even true to the vision of the director, don't we still have the chance to have access to the original cut of it? Because it's more than just the director's cut. It's editing is the soul of movies, so we should have access to it. What happens when you remaster games, right? Especially in an era where everything's now turning digital, and while many now consoles particularly are trying to put the idea, you can play your old games. There's, for example, Sony was promising that you can play your games on PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation 4 in a new PlayStation 5. But we heard some promises of that before. Still, like what happened with Frogwares, it's all dependent on whether or not it's available. And games can be yanked out of digital stores or have exclusivities, or a lot of things can happen and have happened. And for one thing, I'm going to put the first question: does remasters actually help or hinder in game preservation?
No way. It it sort of does both. It really depends on the type of remake it is. There's difference between there's difference between a remaster and a remake. So a remake is essentially making the same game over from scratch and making it might do quality of life improvements, fancier graphics and stuff. A remaster is a essentially taking the exact same game, the exact same source code, and making it slightly better, more compatible to newer hardware, maybe optimizing graphics and optimizing effects and touching up things. Usually, they try not to mess too much with the gameplay, but that also could be a thing that they might affect certain mechanics. They might trim things down or remove some things. So in a way, I think if they don't really do too much of that latter part, then
Mm-hmm.
it would be kind of preserving the same game just in a better, more presentable state. But on the other hand, if they do overhaul it a little too much, if I think of one I heard Jim talking about this, and that was the Deadly Premonition series.
Mm-hmm.
That game apparently was notorious for certain bugs. So if you remove certain bugs and weird, like kind of technical issues with that game, you lose a lot of what made that game special.
Yeah.
And that's a thing you sort of risk losing that. If for some reason the graphics, the lower quality graphics, the effects, the gameplay, or just bugs, the unintentional bugs made that game a charm, it might not translate very well if you remake it, if you either fix those or kinda try to keep them or try to replicate those bugs.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the bugs like to exploits, right? Skip
Yes.
areas, go to areas you couldn't go before, get special items, that sort of thing. And it's like, oh, that's what's part of the charm of this particular game. But you fix those things because they were never meant to be available to players. And then, like, well, it's not the same game, right? And that's the thing. It's like the ship of, it's the concept of the ship of Theseus, right? It, keeps changing so much stuff, especially with constant updates. Because the thing about the remake is we also live in an era where games are not fully finished. So in a way, they're always being constantly remastered. You
Yeah,
get
being touched up.
touched up, new graphics, or sometimes the graphics get taken down a bit as well. Because for whatever reason, right? And you don't get access to that. Oh, for example, think about uh, the the soundtrack of a game pre CD, where usually it was 8-bit or 16-bit, but it was a bit chip tunes kind of thing. You remake
Mhm.
that game. It's like, oh, now we can remake this with an orchestra, a 21-piece orchestra and all that, and singing voices. And the music might be great, but again, talk about the charm of the original music and how inventive and creative they were with it, right?
Yeah,
Um,
because usually you have to kinda utilize those limitations.
yeah, and talk about Final Fantasy VII. It's going to be apparently released in chapters. People don't
Yeah,
remember the fact that the original game for the PlayStation PSX, PlayStation One, was I think 5 disc,
it was 3 discs.
3 discs, yeah. So it was a multi-disc. It was a huge game for the era, right? Um, if you take the same game and sort of, you know, remake it in the way that it's being remade, including new comment and all that, the game it's gonna be like even on Blu-ray, it's gonna be like I don't know 20 Blu-ray discs or something like that. So I'm exaggerating. I'm exaggerating, but so you try to download that even with a high-speed internet, it's gonna be like okay, I want to leave now, and when I come back from work, maybe I'll have half the game there, download it or something, right? Um, and it changes stuff, right? And also, I think the question is, and we sort of touched about this before, is that what is a valid change and what is a not valid change, right? And we're talking about a long conversation with somebody on Tumblr, and we basically said, if you're gonna fix Mass Effect series, the crazy thing you could do is invert the the plots of the first and second game to make a couple of things make sense, right?
Mhm.
Imagine somebody were to remake, not simply a remaster, but remake Mass Effect. They're like, that's a good idea. We're gonna do it. Would it still be Mass Effect?
Yeah, like, would it starts, like, hinting at other characters and stuff throughout the first game. It's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, some report about some crazy, bald-headed criminal with super powerful bionics. I'm sure that's not important," or
yeah, stuff
it's
like that.
it's
Yeah,
yeah, and
uh,
and that's actually sort of a thing I've heard about, and I am kinda concerned in terms of Final Fantasy VII
mhm,
because, like, people have been wanting this remake for years, but Squaresoft has not left this series alone. They have meddled with the series a lot. They've made so many tiny spin-off games, mobile games, a sequel. They made a sequel movie, then they made a sequel to that movie, and a sequel video game to that movie, and then so a lot of people are gonna be like, so are they gonna sort of retroactively add some of those things back in there, like,
mhm,
to make sense? Like, I think there's also, like, a prequel, like, a prequel mini spin-off game,
mhm.
so are elements from that gonna make it into the game, or is there gonna be set up to Advent Children in some fashion? I mean, it's sort of and is that gonna take away from, like, the original intent, or is it gonna just be there? I really can't see it making Final Fantasy, the original concept Final Fantasy, better.
Yeah. Because a lot of things about games and like getting a form more, they are also, whether we like to believe it or not, they are a product of their time and place.
Mhm.
Right. The reason why Final Fantasy VII was so impressive was because it was really the Final Fantasy that broke into the American market at a time where 3D graphics, early 3D graphics on consoles were all the rage. And it looks blocky and kind of cutesy right now, right?
Yeah.
You I mean, you could, I guess, try to play the original if you had a original PlayStation or a version. Or there was a PC version, by the way, as well. And I'm trying to make a point with that in a moment. But it looks very different. It isn't the same game. It can be. It's a tribute in many ways. The best I think I can hope for is as a tribute to the original, but it cannot be the same game because the game of today is a product of what 8 years of on and off things going on with Sony. And other things.
It got rebooted. It got like there was trailers and stuff of gameplay that was shown years ago, and apparently that got all scrapped. And they started over again.
Which means that they're gonna make significant changes to the game, which it shouldn't surprise anybody because Final Fantasy has changed a lot of stuff, including the combat system, which is more like Final Fantasy than the more tactical standard.
Yeah, it looks more like Final Fantasy 15 than it does Final Fantasy 7.
Yeah, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but again, you're not simply you're not simply remastering the old. You are in fact remaking it. I'm gonna also make a positive note here, and this is let's talk about the PC version of Final Fantasy VII. Accessibility, particularly in other platforms. People who have been watching the channel have seen that I've been playing a lot of Japanese games, particularly Ace Combat and games like Yakuza. Well, again, Yakuza was a PlayStation exclusive for a long time. And now it's a Sega game that Sega is putting a lot of their game catalog on PC. And with a lot of remasters, right? The game I'm playing right now, Yakuza, well, when I played Yakuza Kiwami, wasn't exactly the same game as it was in the original PlayStation, right? It can be because it's a PC and it's better graphics. And you see that when you're playing Yakuza 0, again, it incorporates a lot of the changes to the series, right? Even though it's supposed to be a prequel. But I'm glad I got to play Bayonetta, Yakuza 0, Yakuza Kiwami. Maybe I'm not playing the original, but I'm playing the game.
Yeah, you're not playing the original Yakuza game with Mark Hamill as Majima.
Well, actually, I'm just playing the Japanese voices, so I don't know if they changed the Mark Hamill thing, which kind of makes sense because
I think they did. There's no English voices or dialogue in them.
So there's that, right? And changes in localization and stuff like that. Some of the stuff is.
And of course, with Kiwami, they did borrow a couple, or they did incorporate elements of Zero because Zero didn't exist before the original. So I know the entire circuit, car circuit, sub stories and stuff from Zero is sort of in there from the carried over into Kiwami.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh yeah, I remember these people because I had an adventure previously.
Yeah. Which I have to get into those minigames, by the way, as I'm playing, right? But I get to play, I get to experience the games. And I think a lot of people get to do that, either on other platforms, like also brought.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that like I would have ever picked up Yakuza PlayStation 2 if it wasn't for like the Kiwami game.
Yeah.
Well, not that I would actually actively see. I think it's cheap, the Yakuza one. And even then, it's like I've seen I once found it at a used bookstore and looked at the back of the box like, ooh, this looks awful compared to what I'm playing now.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I think I'll just stick to the remakes. And I actually even have a couple of the PlayStation 3 versions of like 4 or 5 because I got those free from PlayStation Plus. But I'm like, you know what? I could just play those or I could just wait until they release them because they already announced that I think 3, 4, and 5 are going to be bundled together, although they're going to be released stagnated in some sort of weird way. And with those, I feel like all they have to do is really just kind of update the engine and combat, maybe. And because from just kind of screenshots and stuff, like the PlayStation 3 games look a little more like the PlayStation 4 game.
And also allows, for example, because something that happens is that later games, because of changes in publishing strategies, etc., they get available to other platforms, but the early games don't. And doing these remasters, they actually are getting into the new platforms, so you actually can play at least a version of the game and get the story and the feeling for it. It's like, oh, okay, I'm working around Kanamusho and fighting, breakdancing with Majima and stuff like that. So you can get to do those things. By the way, that reminds me, I have to watch a video how to actually do the cabaret thing so I don't screw it up. Because it's, I don't know, I'm intrigued by it. I thought I was not getting into it, but first of all, I need the money just to make my character, more powerful. But also, I'm intrigued by how deep it goes. If you only do it once, right? So there's that. So I'm going to look into it. Sorry, my chair is rebelling against me. Another value, I think, well, there's a strike against it, is that essentially is a, yes, first time Howling God. How you doing? First time Yakuza players. That's right. I started with Yakuza Kiwami because I wanted to start at the very beginning. I guess the first game down, and then I went to Yakuza Zero, yep. And now probably gonna go to Yakuza 2 and so on and so forth as they come.
Yeah, I actually picked up Kiwami. I think the seal case book was like $15 on at Target on clearance. I'm like, oh, I've heard some good things about this Yakuza lately, and I played it. I'm like, oh my god, I'm so glad I picked it up.
Yeah. Another thing is with the remakes and remasters, one of the downsides is you get the feeling that, just like watching a lot of Hollywood movies, you're playing the same game over and over and over again. But one could argue that's almost all these yearly releases, right? That we had for over a decade. That you're playing basically the same. They kind of pile up, changes pile up, but one football game is the same as the other one baseball game is the same as the other one, basketball game is the same as the other one, one Assassin's Creed is kind of the same as the other one, right? When they were not taking any breaks, you're kind of playing the same game over and over again, Far Cry, etc. And this kind of adds to it, and that, oh, hey, that game that wasn't there and nobody really cared about, oh, we're gonna remaster so they can make more money out of it, on the IP. And like,
yeah, at some point I'm kind of wondering when it's kind of like a money grab. And you brought it up earlier in terms of like accessibility with especially if you couldn't before. Like I think back to when they remade Mass Effect, they made the Mass Effect trilogy, and the first Mass Effect was never on PlayStation. So then they managed to somehow get it to be able to be published on PlayStation, because that was the Microsoft's game exclusive. And then I think back to the well, here's kind of like the money making thing would be sort of like the Kingdom Hearts series. It's like they re-released a bunch of all the previous games into one packaged and re-release them for PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 4 yet again, because they've actually already re-released these remakes on PlayStation 3, and I probably like Xbox 360, but I still have like the first like Kingdom Hearts like 1 point whatever remix thingy that I bought like dirt cheap one time, and it's still sitting on my shelf waiting to be gone to, still in the shrink wrap, just there. But it's like it's like, oh, you're re-releasing these re-release remakes or remasters again. It's like, oh, okay. Just, I mean, it makes sense before Kingdom Hearts 3. It's like, hey, get caught up on the story and stuff. Play these many dozens of ridiculous games and stuff with all this crazy lore that, again, has had the Final Fantasy VII treatment, where they just keep, they haven't released a sequel, they haven't remade it, but they keep fiddling with the series, and like, oh, and then we introduce these characters, and then these characters were always here in the background somewhere or parallel to the events of the first game, and then prequel, and oh my god, it's
yeah, I mean, there's also the argument, what I call the GOG argument, which is you don't have to remaster, but you can make these games available. The problem with that is, and I think Howling God in many ways is bringing up some of the points as about localization, is that sometimes the original stuff is not that great. It was, again, a product of its era. A great example that I have is Master of Magic. When I was younger and I got my first actual PC, like not a home computer, but an actual business machine as opposed to a home computer, one of the games I played for hours was Master of Magic. So when I got back to GOG about a decade later, it's like, oh, that's that game, or 2 decades later, really. Oh, that is on GOG. I'm gonna get it. I got it. I started playing it. One of the things I noticed, for example, is how slow the game is and how the graphics were not updated. And therefore, it was like, oh, I'm going to select something. Click. And there wasn't anything wrong with the game itself. That was the normal speed, right, when you were playing with a 386, right? You know, Intel 386. Today, that's like, press the button. Click. Right? Or playing X-Wing, the original X-Wing. Again, many hours. But at that time, you could literally have to use the entire keyboard plus your flight stick. I haven't really used a flight stick in a long time. I usually use a controller for most of that stuff. Compressing all those controls into a controller doesn't really work. So there's that disconnect. And would a remake with better graphics and revamped soundtrack all that work? I mean, the soundtrack originally was in disc, but it actually came out. That was a game that actually got remastered because it came out on CD-ROM, so it had a better soundtrack, and they changed the soundtrack. It's sometimes better, sometimes worse, right? It had voice acting of the time, synthesized voices and the like. Great game when it came out, but now I don't think it's playable by most people.
It's playable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing for like the first System Shock. Like, oh, this game is pretty much unplayable nowadays, but people want to sort of replay it. Hence why that remake Kickstarter made a bunch of money. Though that's had its own issues that I believe we sort of touched upon before. And Howling God is also like brought up a good points. Like he says that the localization for Yakuza 3 was pretty much terrible. They also removed some of the mini games and assumed the language barriers and probably assumed that like, oh, this is too much for the West. They wouldn't want to do that. I've heard like similar things to that with other games too.
Yeah, that reminds me of anime, especially in the 1980s, when they would have they would have actually sex, well, nudity, topless. Sometimes they had nudity, especially women being topless, and violence. Like, oh, when a tank exploded, you were supposed to see that there were people in the tank exploding. So what they would do is, of course, they would cut out all the naughty bits, of course. You would never see anybody in the shower, especially women in the shower, stuff like that. All the fan service. And they would say, oh, the giant robot thing is fighting the UN Army robots, planes. And so you have shot after shot of things, planes and tanks exploding. And it's like, oh, no, that's just robots fighting other robots. Right?
Yeah, or like, oh, they managed to get away. See, off screen over there.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of that, and that's part of localization in most games anyway, right? Also, the temptation to make a bad game a good game, sort of a director's cut. I mean, one of the worst things to talk about director's cut that I saw was Deus Ex Human Revolution, because I played the original, like, oh, this is a good game. It's not perfect, but it's a good game. Then they included the director's cut. And oh my god, I hated that part so much. It ruined my enjoyment of the game. They just shoehorned this thing in the middle.
Oh, the DLC.
Yeah.
They shoehorned they patched in the DLC into where it would chronologically fit in. Yeah. It does not flow very well.
No. But it's a director's cut, right? And you're like, it plays very differently in some cases. They do things differently. By the time I was done, I was like, I'm not gonna play this again. I played it on stream. It was
and it doesn't really affect anything either. It's like you did without it the first time, and then you can still do without it, knowing that it's like, oh, that.
And because it's a digital download, that usually is the one version available, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also, older games are sometimes easier to mod. So we talk about modding as well. So a new version of the game doesn't allow for modding, perhaps, or you cannot make the same mods, or you have to take the time to, have the mod community sort of build itself up to the new game. Skyrim is famous and infamous for that, where they got the special edition and legendary edition and all that. Well, like, yeah, we're already using the vanilla version, which we're modding. Now, what now is happening with the mod community is a lot of those mods finally are coming to the special edition, and the older one is being abandoned, slowly but surely.
The mods didn't translate well, did they? They didn't carry over.
No, they can't, because there's just enough changes in it that you have to remake them, right? And so people's like, oh, I spent, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 hours on these mods. I'm not gonna go with it
Especially if
again.
they're like especially if they're really old mods, maybe they're unsupported mods now, but that's because they were fine and they still work, and then of course maybe the person's not even around anymore
Yeah.
to to tweak it.
So I think a final judgment on this is they're not a bad idea.
Mhm.
They have, I think you have to be fair. I mean, going back to the example of both Yakuza and also the Deus Ex, right? You have to go to the idea that the new thing, it's its own thing, right? We're talking about remasters or oh, we're just touching up things. Often there's just enough to change the experience. And I think even if it's just an HD remake, you have to say, okay, let's look at this HD remake on its own terms. Does this game, for example, actually benefit from having prettier graphics, or these change of quality of life changes, right? And judge it on its own merits. I think that's the only way I think I can make peace with remakes and all that. It's like you cannot think of them unless you're literally is taking the game and just releasing in the next year, right? Kind of thing where you just change the roster and stuff like that. But if anything more than that is in play, then you have to judge each game, each version of the game on its own terms. You can reference the old games, like, oh, they did this better or worse, or actually fixed this or this better not. But ultimately, the Final Fantasy of today is not the same Final Fantasy of 20 years ago or something like that, 1990s. The Yakuza 3 that they're gonna release is not certainly not gonna be the same Yakuza of when especially it was localized badly. The Deus Ex Human Revolution with the DLC, the Deus Ex is not the same experience as the original Deus Ex, right? And I would say if you can get a hands on the original Deus Ex and Deus Ex Human Revolution, you get that. F the DLC, just just don't do that, right? If it actually was skippable, I would skip it. But there you go. I experienced it, but you didn't have to. But there you have it. I think that's my final take: is that there is value in it if you look at these games as derivatives, certainly, but
Mhm.
ultimately their own products. What's
Yeah.
your take on it?
And I would have to say yes, it would have to be exactly its own thing. And I think it's kind of funny that I think as fans of video games, I think we're more accepting of remakes of video games than we are of, say, remakes of movies, which I find kind of interesting. It's because I mean, I guess you could still have the same voice actors if you still have the same source codes. You can still keep the same voices,
Mm-hmm.
or even still rehire the same voices if they're still alive. It, but it's interesting that we're pretty much accepting of remakes. Even I mean, even if we're not happy about them, we'll still buy them.
Yeah, we just
And
want to try them out. Yeah.
yeah, but I have to agree with you. I think they're a pretty good thing. They're a pretty good thing in terms of being able to access games that you normally wouldn't have, like the Yakuza series. I think they're going to remake the oh, I don't remember what it's called, but it's essentially Yakuza, but set in like older Japanese times that was never brought to the West, and they're considering actually releasing that in the West. And we've never gotten that officially, which is a great thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, you're introducing new audience to a new franchise or a new game that probably would never have been able to play otherwise, because no
Yeah.
one's going to import a copy then try to play it with Japanese text when they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that before. It's it's not it's difficult, but it's enjoyable. It's doable in some ways. Um, so I think they're a good thing overall. The one thing I don't want to see though eventually is just that when we keep moving to console over console over console, is that we just see these HD these are either remakes or the remasters just get ported over and over again
Mm.
in lieu of like new content and new ideas.
Yeah,
And
true.
that's my only concern with them, is that it might give studios and publishers time to be lazy essentially.
Or be
creatively lazy.
Nintendo, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nintendo, EA, Activision. Yeah, we're seeing a trend. And I think we're probably going to have to talk. I think we already talked about that, but we might also touch upon it in the future. So that's it for our show today. Howling God, thank you for joining us in the chat. Chapamon, where can we find you on the interwebs?
You can find me I'm under Chopamon pretty much anywhere. I'm Chopamon_Aragon on Twitch and Twitter, but I primarily hang out on YouTube as just Chopamon. I recently just posted like a romance video from Greedfall, which I've been playing for the past couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's better. It's the spiders have done a better job this time with their romance. Still not great, but it's definitely better.
They're working at it, I suppose.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress, as everything else in life. And of course, you can find me here on the Lessons Learned 1 channel. I am playing Yakuza 0 Kiwami. Actually, not just Yakuza 0. Kiwami starts in 1 and on because it actually means remake or something close to it. So I'm going to be playing that until probably the end of the month. September is still going around till 2 days. So if you wish to join the channel by subbing, you can do so at a reduced price of half price because Subway is supposedly taking the other price off it, so you're more than welcome. You can drop bits. You can also join us in the chat, and we also have a Discord. So thank you everybody for coming, and we'll see you when we see you. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.